Application Development. Topic 9. Documentation and User Manuals. What is the primary purpose of documentation in software development? To provide detailed instructions and information about the system. What does a user manual typically include? Instructions for users to operate a product or system. Which of the following is a key feature of effective documentation? It is clear, concise, and easy to understand. What type of documentation is aimed at developer and engineers? Technical documentation. Which of the following is an example of user documentation? End user installation guide. What is the role of release notes in documentation? To describe any known issues and new changes in the software. What is a help manual typically used for? To explain how to use the software features. Which of the following is not a type of documentation? Project timeline. What is the main difference between user documentation and system documentation? User documentation is aimed at non technical users, while system documentation is for developers. Which section is typically found in a user manual? Troubleshooting and FAQs. What is the primary focus of API documentation? Describing the application programming interface and how to interact with it. How should a user manual be structured? With a logical, easy to follow structure and a table of contents. What is a common tool used to create technical documentation? Microsoft Word. What type of information is typically found in a system manual? Hardware configuration and system requirements. What should a user manual include for effective troubleshooting? A troubleshooting guide with common issues and solutions. What is the purpose of a quick start guide in user documentation? It helps users get started with the software quickly. How often should user manuals be updated? Whenever there are updates or changes to the product. Which of the following is not part of a user manual's content? A list of all developers who worked on that software. What is the best format for delivering user manuals for easy access? PDF or online formats? What type of documentation is crucial for software maintenance? Technical documentation. What is the importance of version control in documentation? It ensures that the latest documentation is available and track changes over time. What role does a table of contents play in a user manuals? It provides easy navigation to different sections of the manual. What is the purpose of using visuals such as screenshots in documentation? To help users understand the interactions instructions more clearly. What does the acronym SOP stand for in the context of documentation? Standard operating procedure. Why is it important to keep documentation up to date? To ensure accuracy and reflect any new features or changes in the product. Which of the following should not be included in a user manual? Detailed technical descriptions for developers. How is user feedback useful in improving documentation? It helps in identifying areas of confusion and making improvements. What is the primary goal of a user manual? To help users understand and effectively use the product. What type of information would be found in an installation guide? Step by step instructions for setting up the software. What is the role of glossary in documentation? To list technical terms and their definitions for the user. What is the purpose of context sensitive help in documentation? It provides help based on the user's current action and or screen. Which of the following is not a typical format for user manual? Spreadsheet. What does user centric documentation focus on? The needs of experience of the users. What is one advantage of creating online documentation? It can be easily updated and accessed remotely. What is the purpose of providing step by step instructions in the user manual? To guide users through complex tasks in an organized manner. What type of documentation would a software development company use to track bugs? Bug tracking system. What does dynamic documentation mean? Documentation that changes in real time based on the user's interaction. What does accessibility mean in the context of documentation? The ability for people with disabilities to easily read and understand it. What is a formatting guide in the context of documentation? Answer is a guide for writers on how to format the document to ensure consistency. What does contextual help provide in a software application? Help that is related to the user's current task or screen. Which document would a product manager use to communicate feature requirements to developer? Feature specification document. What does multilingual documentation refer to? Documentation available in multiple languages. What role does user feedback for play documentation? It helps improve and refine the documentation based on user experiences. Why is consciousness important in documentation? To ensure that the documentation is easy to read and follow. What type of information should a user manual include? Troubleshooting steps, installations, instructions, and feature usage. How can you visual aids like diagrams help in documentation? They provide additional context and clarity for complex information. What does versioning in documentation mean? Maintaining different versions of the documentation based on software updates. What is onboarding documentation? Documentation that helps new employees or users get started with a product or system. How does usability testing relate to documentation? It ensures the documentation is user friendly and easy to understand. What is the primary advantage of having well written documentation? It helps users effectively use the software and reduces the need for support.